Good morning and welcome to our garden here at the Heirloom Farmer. I'm Abby and I'm really excited to give you a garden tour today, June 3rd. The weather this spring has been wild to say the least, but we're finally getting some warm, sunny weather this week. A little bit dramatic to go from cold and wet to this hot and sunny, but we are loving it, and so is our garden. And so I wanted to give you a tour and update you on what's growing in the garden. If you're feeling behind in your garden or discouraged with the weather this spring, that is totally understandable. But I would encourage you you have a lot of growing season left, and there is a lot that you can plant and grow right now and throughout the season. So do not be discouraged. I heard something this week, actually from Jess with Roots and Refuge Farm, which is one of my favorite YouTube channels to watch for her garden tours. But she said something that really helped me with perspective, and I think is something that we need to remember a lot as gardeners. She said, do not let perfect be the enemy of good and done. And I think that is perfect when it comes to gardening. Is sometimes we have all of these ideals, which are great, but sometimes we just need to get things done. There's ideal times to plant, ideal times to harvest, ideal ways to grow, but sometimes we get so caught up in the ideal situation that we get paralyzed and we don't get anything done. So that is what I am reminding myself of this week as I am gardening and just getting things done. But I wanted to just go through kind of bed by bed and let you know what we've got going on in the garden. This bed here is the no-dig or no-till bed that we started this spring. And the way that we did that, I highly recommend no-dig and doing it this way. It's so much less work and better results. So we put down a heavy layer of hay and straw. You could use hay or straw or both. We had both available. We put it down pretty thick, like 4 to 6 inches, right on top of lawn like this, a clover and grass mix. We just mowed it regularly and then put down the straw and hay really thick, and then on top of that I put down several inches of compost, and then I was able to pretty quickly start planting right into this bed. And I have found that this method works really well. I used to put the straw and hay on top of the compost, but I had more trouble with slugs that way. So by doing it this way, I've had less slug issues, but I still get all of the organic matter from the hay and straw, and it suppresses the weeds. So I've been planting into this bed ever since we put the compost down. At the end here, we had some plants that were mixed up and not labeled after the storm. So some of these I'm not totally sure what they are, but they're either cauliflower or broccoli, maybe some cabbage we've got in there. These are onions that I multi-sowed and grew from seed, and they're doing really well. And I like to keep lettuce transplants available. I plant lettuce every week or every other week, so that I always have transplants I can stick into open spaces in our garden. That gives us a continual supply of lettuce, and it keeps everything planted and covered. and that also helps with preventing weeds. We've got some more. I think that is kohlrabi there in the middle, but again, it was may not have been labeled correctly. I just planted Black Beauty zucchini transplants. You can direct sow a lot of things like zucchini, squash, cucumbers, but I have trouble with slugs and cucumber beetles, and I've found that transplants typically have a better chance of surviving. Also, because I have trouble with those pests, I plant a few more plants than what I actually need in hopes that at least, one or two will successfully grow and produce plants. So I don't actually need 4 zucchini plants, but I planted them to hopefully outgrow the pests. I'll also plant another succession, at least one more succession of squash, to again get around the pests. You can see, oh, he just disappeared under the leaf. There's a cucumber beetle. That's what they do. That's damage from them, and they're a nuisance, but oftentimes plants can outgrow them if you can keep the population in check. I've got a tiny Tim tomato there, more lettuce that I tucked in. I did sow some cosmos from seed in this area, but I do a lot of transplants. Again, I've just had better success that way with getting germination and healthy plants established. I've got a dahlia that I started from seed and tomatoes on the cattle panel trellis. I'll go around the other side and talk more about the tomatoes. I put in some yellow squash here. This is cabbage I planted a while ago. And tomatoes. So I've got the tomatoes there for the cattle panel trellis, interplanted with a variety of things. I unfortunately had something munch off this tomato plant, so I have another one that I'm going to plant there because that one was eaten so much I don't think it will recover. It may, but I'm gonna go ahead and replace it. But I really like growing on the cattle panel trellises for cucumbers and all kinds of things. And then here between the stakes, I did direct sow beans. I typically can direct sow beans and they do well. So I have those. They are jade bush beans, which are a really good bean. I'm getting ready to plant some nasturtium. I highly recommend you grow nasturtium in your garden. It is a beautiful flower and foliage, so the leaves are just cool in and of themselves, and the Alaska mix has variegated leaves. You can't quite see the variegation yet, but it'll have green and white leaves, and they get lots of flowers on them, which is great for insects, but also the leaves, the flowers, and the seeds are all edible, and they're just a beautiful addition to the garden. And when people ask me about companion planting, my recommendation, and again, this is just what works for me and what I enjoy doing, I do not worry about companion planting at all. I plant things where I want to plant them in the garden. I don't necessarily worry about what is next to what type of plants or what, all of the companion planting recommendations. But one thing I do, and that I have found to be really important, is to always plant flowers throughout my garden. Nasturtium is one that I definitely plant all throughout my garden. Marigolds, sweet alyssum, and then I also let some of my herbs flower as well. And that really helps with keeping insects in balance. This is the praying mantis egg sac, which I don't think this one has hatched yet, but it should hatch soon. And then I also have this entire bed of flowers back here that I plant for the insects, mostly in perennials. There are some annuals in there. It'll be really full by really just in a few weeks. It'll be full of beautiful flowers, but I also don't clean that up. So I leave all the plant materials in there year round to give beneficial insects a place to live. And that helps keep my insect populations in balance for the most part. All right, so in our raised beds over here, I've talked about the vole traps before. You can look at past videos for more information about those. Got a lot of garlic growing and it's doing well. I just planted A and C pickling cucumbers here. They're a Pennsylvania heirloom. And again, I planted those pretty close together, knowing that we do deal with some pests. And then they'll climb up the cattle panel trellis. I have planted some white icicle radishes on the recommendation of, I am drawing a blank on the name right now. Someone in the Homestead State College Facebook group recommended planting white icicle radishes and letting them bloom to help deter pests like squash bugs. So I'm giving that a try. And I have some more cucumbers planted here. Along with tucking lettuce in where I have space, I also like to put kohlrabi in anywhere I have a little bit extra space. It grows pretty quickly. And then we harvest it and that allows space for something else to grow. And I also like doing interplanting. So I planted some cabbage, a early Jersey cabbage variety that's supposed to do well in all seasons. I interplanted it in with the garlic. So by the time it starts to get big and grow, we will have harvested the garlic. And by planting like that and filling in spaces, keeping things always planted, we maximize how much we are able to grow in a small space. On this side of the trellis, I have a tomato and a cucumber, a Market More cucumber. There you can see lettuce tucked in, some broccoli, kohlrabi, which a purple kohlrabi is beautiful. Another cucumber and tomato down there. Radish, I did direct sow the radish and we've been harvesting a few small radishes for salads. And also beets that I sowed directly, although I have been also transplanting beets and that has been working well. Some chives here, chive blossoms. You can eat the blossoms and we love eating chives and all kinds of things. More garlic. Here's another chive plant. I just trimmed it back pretty good yesterday because the blooms were pretty well done. And hang on, there's a bee chasing me around. Okay. So I trimmed those back and then they'll regrow really well. Sorry, I'm slightly distracted by this giant bee, but thinks he needs to hang out with us. We also have more garlic here that's starting to send up scapes. So I had mentioned before that we've eaten a lot of green garlic where you eat like the stalk, kind of like you would a green onion or a leek. The next thing we'll do is pull the scapes and you can eat those. We kind of eat them like asparagus. You can also make pesto with them. You can saute them, grill them. There's a ton of ways that you can enjoy garlic scapes. Here's one that is getting ready to be where I would harvest. Some people wait until they curl and then pull them, but at that point they start to get a little bit tough. So I don't wait that long, at least I don't on purpose. Sometimes they are sneaky and get ahead of me, but I'll probably let these go just a little bit more and then I'll start harvesting those. Some more kohlrabi I tucked in, dill that I sowed way back in April, and it is doing really, really well. Lots of lettuce. This is the Heirloom blend of lettuce, and we've been harvesting from that. You can see I harvested a lot from this one recently, and I just pull the outer leaves and let enough of the plant there that it will continue to regrow. Peas on the trellis, and I have a volunteer sunflower there, and some melons I just planted last night on this trellis. And I will plant something here in front of the peas in probably a few weeks, maybe some runner beans. Once the peas are getting close to the end of their season, I'll plant beans or something else, I haven't decided yet, that will then climb up the trellis so I don't have empty space. Similar over here, I have one tomato plant and then the peas, and we should be starting to get peas pretty soon. Oh yeah, look, there's one. I may have that one as a snack later. So we'll harvest the peas, but then as they start to reach the end of their season, I will add something in to climb up that trellis, maybe a later round of cucumbers. More lettuce interplanted with more onions, and another volunteer sunflower down there. This is broadleaf sage, so it's a culinary sage, but it started to bloom, and rather than cutting it back, I thought, I'll let it bloom and see what it looks like, and it is absolutely beautiful. I'm glad I did that. So I'll let it continue flowering and enjoy that, and then I'll cut it back to get some regrowth. I usually harvest most of the sage later in the year, in the fall anyway, to use with sausage when we process meat. This bed here is just garlic right now, but once that comes out, I'll put a lot of fall crops in there. And by continually harvesting and planting, it does a couple things. So by continually harvesting and planting, you have a steady supply of food from your garden, but it also makes planting easier and more enjoyable because you're not planting everything at once. You're planting a little bit here, a little bit there. So just about every week I'm harvesting something and planting something all season long, and that means that we have fresh food to eat all season long, and I'm always adding something. And if something does get eaten or pests are really hard on something, we have successions, we have more that we're planting, and that increases our chances of having really successful yields. This is the mini tunnel that I built this spring. It has served its purpose and will be coming off today because of the hot weather. But you can see in here, we had lettuce here that we harvested, head lettuce. And then I planted a tiny Tim tomato and basil, and I'll continue to plant some things in there. There's chard back here that we've been harvesting. I prefer the leaves when they're really small, so I harvest it frequently and pretty aggressively to keep the leaves small. And chard is nice because it's relatively pest free. And then these are beets that I have planted really closely together, but as they get bigger, we start harvesting them. So I've already harvested 2 albino beets, and then as I harvest the bigger ones, it makes room for the smaller ones to grow, and we get a really nice harvest of beets from those 2 rows there. I got sweet alyssum because it's beautiful, it smells good, and it's great for insects, especially hoverflies. which are a really great beneficial insect in the garden. And then this is the first round of kohlrabi that I planted, and you can see it's starting to get a nice bulb on that. We'll let them get a little bit bigger. But then one thing I like to do with anything when I'm harvesting is, rather than waiting and harvesting all of a crop at once, I just harvest a little bit at a time so that we can eat it fresh. It tastes best that way. It stores best in the garden growing, and then we just harvest it and eat it as we need to, rather than harvesting everything all at once. Obviously there's some plants that you need to harvest at more of a specific time, but I really like to do what I call succession harvesting, so that we're getting that continuous supply of fresh food, and it's not just sitting on the counter wilting, that we're eating it fresh. Got some kale here, kind of shaded by the kohlrabi, but that's okay. It's doing just fine with that, and we harvest it small as well. Got a row of carrots here. They definitely need some growing time yet, but I do the same thing. I start to pull the bigger ones as they're ready, and then that gives room for the smaller ones to grow and spread. Some more lettuce here that we've been harvesting. I just harvested lettuce from here last night for us to eat. And they're gonna need to be harvested pretty soon. But they're doing well. And then this, I think because of all of the wood and the straw that I use in my garden, I have kind of an imbalance of roly-polies. You can see a bunch there. They're not necessarily a problem in the garden, but when you get a huge population, they do eat small seedlings. Some of this damage here is from roly-polies, some is from slugs. So again, they're not necessarily a problem in the garden, but because I have so many of them, I have been collecting them under that board because they like it. And then once a day, I carry the board over to our compost pile and thump them off in the compost pile, because they're really good at helping your compost to decompose. So I try to work with the insects as much as possible, and that's one way that we do that. But this cover is going to come off, and as I harvest each of these plants, I will have things ready to put in. Peppers are going to go in here soon, and probably some other bush beans, and maybe some Space Master cucumbers, so that this space is always full. There's a lot of benefits to always having your garden full. Obviously, it looks great and it means you have a bountiful harvest, but when the soil is covered, that is great for the soil health, but also totally reduces weeding, because the weeds don't get sunlight, or the weed seeds don't get stirred up. And so it really, really reduces the amount of weeds. And that's also why I kind of ignore spacing rules. I mean, I don't plant things crazy close together, but you'll see I do really plant things thickly and close together to maximize space, to always keep the soil covered, and to suppress weeds. And again, just get a lot of harvest from our garden. And just to show you a few other things, and then we'll wrap up for today. If you have questions, let me know in the comments. I would love to hear from you. And if you are ever interested in an in-person tour, we do offer in-person tours. You can reach out to me and we can talk about scheduling an in-person tour. I love to share my garden with you. And when you're here in person, you actually can get to taste things and smell flowers, and it's so much better than a video. But as I mentioned, this is my insect bed that I plant in flowers, and just entirely for the purpose of encouraging beneficial insects and it's also beautiful when it's in bloom. I expanded it slightly, so I have a lot of areas that I need to plant and fill in. But last year I had planted a lot down here that's coming back. So there's echinacea coming back, coreopsis here that's getting ready to bloom. It'll be a beautiful yellow. Bee balm, and these are marshmallow that are coming back, and they get a beautiful flower on, similar to a hollyhock. And then I sowed some borage in here that's coming up, and I'm gonna just keep filling this bed in. Again, the more plants you have growing, the less weeds you have to deal with. But I do use straw and hay in here as mulch to help with the weeds. And then this is a new bed that I'm starting. We have a compost pile there that we're using up, but then I'm starting a new bed here that I am hoping to plant more fruit, berries, and perennial plants in here. So I have the hay and straw down very thickly, and then I started adding the compost on top, and I'll just continue doing that. But the main reason I wanted to show you this is because I have found one of the best ways to have a successful garden and enjoy it is by keeping it small, which can be hard to do. I always want to make it bigger, but by keeping it small and manageable, it's much more enjoyable. And then when I do expand, I only expand a little bit at a time. So this is as much as I'm going to expand, at least until fall. But by expanding a little bit at a time, it's much easier to have enough time and attention to keep the weeds under control, and also to have enough resources to do a really great job. So by only expanding a small space at a time, we have enough of our own compost that I can cover a thick layer of compost, and then that is very successful for healthy plants, healthy soil, and keeping weeds suppressed. So it's not that you have to keep your garden tiny, but start small and then grow slowly, but always try and keep it a manageable size. And I've had so much more success since I actually scaled my garden back from what it used to be, and it's much more enjoyable. And then these are our compost piles. I'm certainly not an expert on compost, but I've been learning a lot, especially from Charles Dowding. And I use the hay bales because that's what we have available, and they work really well as sides for my compost pile. This one I filled last year, so hopefully that compost I will have ready soon, maybe like mid-summer. This compost pile we just filled this spring, and we're still filling. I'll keep filling it for probably another 2 weeks, and then we'll let it start to mature. And then this is a new one I just started. I had a bunch of weeds, especially thistles, that I was nervous about composting, but I put them on the very bottom of the pile and covered them in hay, and we shall see. I hope I don't regret that. But I have successfully composted weeds before, including thistles, just not that many. So if you're looking for composting information, I highly recommend Charles Dowding. I also recommend all his no-dig information and videos. I've learned so much from him, and I will keep you updated on how the composting goes. All right, that is our garden tour for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have questions, let me know. I would love to encourage you in your garden journey and help you have a successful and, most of all, an enjoyable garden this season. So please feel free to ask any questions or reach out if you would like to visit in person. Thank you, and God bless.